when we were talking off camera earlier, it was Bernie Mac was the comedian that had shared that story. And, a lot of that, and I wanted to ask you this about you as a parent now. So, Bernie Mac, his mother and father were afraid to share that with him about his mother suffering from breast cancer, because it was almost like they had done something wrong. And I wonder, how did you work through that yourself personally with all the, with the judgment people had on you, not just your son, but on you?
Yeah. Well, I think it was a big deal when Nick became addicted. Part of the reason I kept it secret was that I was ashamed. I felt, first of all, I felt judged. I felt that I would be judged. This whole idea of, the word drug addict is so dark and heavy in our culture that I thought, what would it mean that my child was a drug addict? But then there was the other piece about it, which is, what did I do wrong? I must have done something wrong. I have this kid who's become, this immoral person. He was breaking into our home. He broke into our friends' homes. He was doing all these things that were completely unconscionable. So, we are responsible for our kids, our parents. So it must have been something I did in the way that I raised him. And it's common. I hear this from so many parents. It's like we beat ourselves up. If only I'd done something different. I did that. If only I'd stayed in my first marriage. If only I had been, a better parent in some way. If only I had protected Nick more in some ways. One of the things we learn through the process of recovery, not just the recovery for the person who's addicted, but also for family, is that this is a disease that hits anybody. Sometimes families do contribute to the climate in which this disease flourishes, but we don't cause it. It's one of the it's one of the tenets or whatever it is of Al-Anon. Is that you didn't cause it, can't control it, you can't cure it.
Yeah.
And I had a hard time with those things. I didn't believe it. Maybe I did believe I couldn't cure it because I tried and tried and tried. But I didn't believe I didn't cause it, at least contributed to it.
You mentioned in your talk today about the struggle you had in finding credible information to deal with this. Where have you seen that move, and what is still needed?
Well, when I was thrown into this blindsided, I had no idea even where to start to get the child help. And he was by the time I was ready, by the time I was out of the denial phase of this whole thing, pretending it wasn't happening or pretending it wasn't that bad or pretending it was going to get better on its own, he was really, really, really in trouble and we needed help desperately. So I didn't even know where to start. And it was all about, referrals of people. I talked to the school counselors I called a local therapist and our pediatrician, and nobody knew. Nobody had any idea. So I did what we do when I had to make some decisions. So somebody told me that they knew somebody whose kid had a drug problem, and I called them up and they said, oh yeah, my kid went. And so that's how Nick got into his first program, and that's how he got into his second program. And then he got kicked out of a program, and so the counselor said, this kid is sort of this incorrigible, bratty teenager, and I think he probably would have been even if he wasn't on crystal meth. He's just, that's kind of what a lot of teenagers are. But anyway, the guy said, you got to send him to this place because it's, they're much tougher on the kids. That's how I navigated the system. And, and it's really hard to know because there is not a standard way that is, it's not a sort of a protocol, which there are with other diseases. You know how to start, you know how to progress. It is improving, but it's improving really slowly. It's still hard to get good information. But as we start to understand what treatment is, and what good treatment is, that we know that there is treatment that is based on evidence. It's not just sort of random shots in the dark that we're using because we think it might work or because it worked for me or because it's always been used. But we know there's evidence-based treatments, and so at least we know where to start. We need to start a look for treatment centers that provide evidence-based treatment. And even that's not easy because you can call up a place and say, my child has dual diagnosis, is bipolar and also is addicted. Can you help him? Do you offer evidence-based treatment? Will he see a psychiatrist? Will he see a social worker? Are all the components in place? Most places are going to say yes. At least that's my experience, whether they have it or not. So the question of going beyond that and really knowing is tough. It's still a challenge.
You mentioned in your speech, those standards are so critical, and I think, we've experienced that where, everybody claims dual diagnosis. But what does that mean?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about, because I really thought that you were spot on when you talked about an integrated treatment model where you've got the specialists that are all involved. Could you talk a little bit about your experience along those lines?
Well, many times Nick would go into treatment, and other kids, I hear about it from parents, and it's not just kids, adults too, and they go into treatment programs there's this assumption that this is a problem that is way simpler than it is. And so one therapist is in charge of this whole treatment. And it doesn't work, and it's not the therapist's fault. It's just too complicated and too big. What is being adopted in places that actually have studied this stuff, that are using evidence-based practices, is that just like in another field of medicine, we rely on a team approach. Every patient is different. Case manager may be the one that would be the central figure, or a therapist, but sometimes patients need to be also working with a psychiatrist. Sometimes there are problems in their life that are, sort of to do with their families or to do with their environment when they go home, so there needs to be social workers involved. There needs to be this whole puzzle together, all these pieces to offer the treatment that someone needs. And that's being adopted, but it's being adopted, slowly, too slowly. But in the meantime, there is a recognition that no one person can do it all.